I think we've seen throughout the crisis, and this was obviously before the crisis as well, that mayors are really shouldering the mantle of leadership. And that's happening as most national governments lack the vision, the ambition, or the will to take action. We're seeing mayors really refuse to return to a status quo that was failing us before the pandemic and trying to take advantage of the pause that they're facing to rethink their urban systems and correct decades of poor planning that designed cities for cars rather than for people. And the work that Janie was talking about is a great example. We've seen now cities that have announced more than 1,500 miles of roadways that are going to be closed or transformed into bike lanes, pedestrian zones, outdoor cafes, and parks. And these aren't just from cities that you usually think of as climate leaders like Paris and Barcelona. It's Louisville, it's Lexington, it's Cincinnati. It's cities all over the world that are recognizing that they need to take this action. And in many cases, these ambitions are leapfrogging pilots to whole-scale change. And I hope that's one lesson that we'll see, that you don't have to think small or act small, that there are real opportunities and needs to do this. So Oakland's installed bike lanes in 10% of their streets. Milan, I think, is implementing one of the most ambitious open streets programs that's rethinking public plazas, bike lanes, slowing speeds down in areas to make it safer for people. Barcelona is removing parking from 13 miles of streets throughout the city. Montreal is creating 212 miles of bike lanes. And Paris is outdoing everyone. They're actually creating 400 miles of bike lanes and closing 30 streets as pedestrian zones. So really thinking holistically around that. Another 30 cities are converting roadways into what they're calling dining and market streets. And that's really to help businesses who need to comply with social distancing to be able to have more space to get enough customers in that they can survive in an economic recovery. I imagine many of those cities are not going to return to allowing parking in those areas or allowing street cars through it, as people really like the outdoor cafes and like more space. And that's causing cities to rethink permitting and how do they make an easier interface for businesses to help them. And while the initial action is taking place in the public right of way, I really think, and what I hope we'll see is the next phase of the revolution evolving into buildings and energy efficiency. That needs to happen quickly before people return to offices and refill. There's a real opportunity and moment to think about how do you redesign offices? How do you inject energy efficiency? How do you help retail and hospitality sectors that are empty now but need to save money on the margin to survive, and using low cost of capital and a decline in customers now to inject that efficiency into it. And that really needs to be quickly followed, building on Tony's conversation, to a rethinking of our infrastructure and land use. Hopefully it will be timed with a federal stimulus, though I sometimes feel like waiting for Congress to act is like waiting for the Spurs to win the Premier League championship. It's something that may never come. And we really need to make sure that new investments don't lead to sprawl, because those are going to lock us into an enormous amount of greenhouse gas emissions. And we're really at an important moment where we could inflect in the right direction and accelerate our climate action, or take major steps back if we go down the pathway we normally take.